I felt my knees weaken when I saw her across the sidewalk. My Catherine, so elegant in that gray coat and high-heeled shoes that matched her leather purse. She hardly resembled the little girl I used to cradle on fever nights, singing lullabies while preparing cold compresses for her forehead. My heart raced like a frantic drum. It had been nearly 8 years since I'd last seen my own flesh and blood, my daughter. Before I continue, tell me in the comments which city you're reading this story from and if you've ever experienced something similar. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss stories like this one. I straightened my faded floral dress, the one I had sewn so many years ago, and ran my hand through my gray hair, which I'd pulled back in a simple bun. Would she recognize me? Would she feel embarrassed by me, like those times when she asked me to drop her off at the corner before school? Even so, with 72 years on my back and a world of disappointments in my heart, I couldn't control myself. I walked toward her. Catherine, my daughter? That's when I noticed the man beside her. Tall, well-dressed, wearing a watch that probably cost more than everything I'd ever owned in my life. My daughter froze when she saw me. Her eyes, so similar to her father's, widened as if she'd seen a ghost. And maybe that's exactly what I represented to her, a haunting from the past that needed to be exorcised. Sorry, ma'am, I don't have any change. Please step away. Her words struck me like knife wounds. Beggar. She had called me a beggar. Me, Martha Jenkins, who spent sleepless nights sewing uniforms so she would always have clean clothes for school. Me, who washed other people's clothes to pay for her registration in writing competitions. Me, who sold my wedding rings when Benjamin died to buy the books she needed for college. I don't know this woman, she said to the man beside her, her voice controlled but trembling. She must be confusing me with someone else. I stood paralyzed, like an old tree that had lost its leaves and was only waiting for the axe. The wrinkles on my face seemed to deepen in that instant, each one marking a pain, a sacrifice, a renunciation I had made out of love. All those days of work, hands cracked, from scrubbing other people's floors, back bent from ironing, all for what? To be denied on the street like a stranger, a homeless person. But then something strange happened. The man beside her didn't look away as she expected. On the contrary, his eyes fixed on me with growing curiosity. Suddenly his face transformed into an expression that mixed shock and emotion. He stepped forward, ignoring Catherine, who was discreetly pulling at his arm. Mom? That word, spoken by that voice, now deep but with a timbre I would never forget, cut through decades of silence. I recognized in that adult man the boy I had cradled in my arms for 16 years of my life. Peter, I whispered, unable to believe what I was seeing. He approached, his eyes watery, and without hesitation embraced me right there in the middle of the busy sidewalk in downtown Boston. A strong, desperate embrace, as if he feared I might disappear again. I looked for you. For years, he said between sobs. When Dad died, I found your letters hidden in his office. They never reached me. And you? What would you do if you discovered that the letters you wrote with so much love never reached their recipient? Beside us, Catherine seemed to have seen a ghost. Her eyes darted from me to Peter, trying to comprehend the connection. The world seemed to spin in slow motion as she lost color, and without warning collapsed on the ground like a rag doll. Catherine! I instinctively cried out, rushing to support her despite my legs aching from arthritis. Peter quickly took her in his arms and carried her to a nearby cafe. I followed them, stunned by the whirlwind of emotions that invaded me. My daughter, unconscious and in the arms of the boy I had raised as my son. Fate had a cruel and poetic sense of humor. Inside the cafe, The waiter helped us accommodate Catherine on a sofa, while Peter asked for water and smelling salts. People looked on, curious about this unusual scene. An elderly woman in simple clothes, an elegant man in a suit, and a well-dressed, unconscious woman. "What's going on?" Peter asked, holding my wrinkled hands in his. "How do you know my wife?" Wife. The word echoed in my mind like a bell. My daughter had married the boy I had raised. The world seemed to collapse on top of me. "Peter, I began, but the words got stuck in my throat. Catherine began to wake up at that moment, her eyes opening slowly. When she saw me sitting next to Peter, panic took over her face. I could read the fear in her eyes, the terror that I might reveal the truth and destroy the life she had built. "How are you feeling, love?" Peter asked, concerned, running his hand through her hair. I'm fine. Just a dizzy spell." She avoided my gaze at all costs. "Catherine, you won't believe it. This is Martha, the woman who raised me. Remember I told you about her? The nanny who was like a mother to me until I was 16, when Teresa, my stepmother, sent her away." I saw the relief in her eyes when she realized that Peter didn't know anything, that he had no idea who I really was in her life. She adjusted herself on the sofa, regaining her composure along with the coloring. Her face. Is that so?" she said, trying to sound interested, but her eyes begged me to keep silent. At that moment, I made the most difficult decision of my life. I looked at Peter, at the good man he had become, and at Catherine, the daughter who was ashamed of me, and I chose silence. "Yes, I took care of this boy since he was a newborn," I said with a voice choked with contained emotion. "His mother passed away in childbirth, and his father needed help. I stayed with him until he was 16. "And what about you, Catherine? How do you know her?" Peter asked innocently. I watched my daughter swallow hard, cold sweat glistening on her forehead. She was cornered, and I could expose her at that moment. Just one sentence. "She's my daughter, Peter, the child I had with Benjamin after I left your parents' mansion." But instead I said, "We met many years ago. I used to clean the house of a friend of hers." The relief on Catherine's face was so great that I could almost hear the sigh she held back. Peter smiled, suspecting nothing, and squeezed my hand. "What an incredible coincidence. Do you remember her, love? From which friend's house?" From Lucy's," Catherine improvised, regaining her confidence. "It was so long ago I almost didn't remember." "And then you fainted, why?" Peter insisted, confused. "I think it's low. Blood pressure," she answered quickly. "I didn't have breakfast today." Peter accepted the explanation and soon ordered a snack for her. While he was talking to the waiter, Catherine gave me a look that mixed gratitude and shame. I merely nodded slightly, an almost imperceptible gesture that sealed our silent pact. "Mom," Peter turned to me, the words sounding sweet and familiar. "I can't believe I found you after so many years. Where are you living? How have you been?" I told him an edited version of my life. I talked about the years as a domestic worker, about my small apartment in Brooklyn, about how I supported myself making embroidery that I sold at craft fairs. I didn't mention Benjamin, or Catherine's birth, or the nights of hunger when the money didn't last the whole month. Peter listened attentively, his eyes shining with admiration. "You've always been so strong, Mom. Remember how you protected me from Dad's scoldings? How you waited up for me when I came back from teenage parties?" I smiled, the memories returning like an old film. "I remember everything, my son, every detail." "And you? Have you ever missed someone to the point of keeping every small detail in memory even after decades?" As we talked, I observed Catherine, out of the corner of my eye. She kept stirring her coffee, avoiding participating in the conversation. I could see in her face the constant fear that I might, at any moment, reveal our secret. "Let's do this," Peter said enthusiastically. "I'll take you home now, see where you live, and on the weekend you come to dinner at our house, right, love?" Catherine forced a smile. "Of course. That would be great." "You don't need to bother," I replied. "You must have a very busy life." "Nonsense," Peter insisted. "I just found my foster mother. This deserves a celebration." We left the cafe, Peter between us two, talking animatedly about his plans. He drove to my small apartment, observing with tender eyes the simple but clean and organized place where I lived. We said goodbye with the promise that I would have dinner at their house on Sunday. When I was finally alone, I collapsed in my worn armchair and cried as I hadn't in years. Tears of joy for having found my Peter again. Tears of pain for Catherine's rejection. Tears of confusion for this strange fate that had united the two beings I loved most in life. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining what it would be like to enter their house, to sit at the table with my daughter pretending I was just her husband's nanny, not her mother. How would I bear to maintain this farce? But then I thought, what right did I have to destroy their happiness out of selfishness, out of wounded pride? I spent the entire week nervous, choosing what to wear, rehearsing what to say. I made a cornbread cake, a recipe that Peter loved as a child. I also prepared a special embroidery, a tablecloth with wildflowers that I worked on day and night to finish in time. When Sunday arrived, my heart was pounding. I took one bus and then another to reach the address Peter had given me in Westchester, an elegant neighborhood that I only knew from passing by outside. The building was imposing with a uniformed doorman and an impeccable garden at the entrance. "Good afternoon. Are you Mr. Peter's guest?" asked the doorman. "Yes, that's me." "Apartment 1501. He has already advised that you would be coming." I entered the mirrored elevator and observed my reflection. I had put on my best dress, navy blue with small flowers, and a wool coat that Benjamin had given me on my last birthday before he passed away. I had pinned my hair with golden clips and even applied a light lipstick. I wanted to look presentable, not embarrass my daughter even more. When the elevator door opened on the 15th floor, I took a deep breath before ringing the doorbell. Peter opened the door with a radiant smile. "Mom, I'm so glad you came." He hugged me and led me inside. The apartment was immense, decorated with elegant furniture and artwork on the walls. Through the windows, you could see the city stretching as far as the eye could reach. "Catherine is finishing getting ready," he explained. "Sit down, make yourself comfortable." But I couldn't relax in that environment. It felt like at any moment someone would come tell me I didn't belong there, that I should use the service entrance, as had happened so many times in the houses where I worked. Peter served wine in crystal glasses. "Let's toast to our reunion, Mom." I smiled nervously, holding the glass carefully, afraid of breaking it. That's when Catherine entered the living room, beautiful in an emerald green dress, her hair loose framing her face. Our eyes met for a brief moment before she looked away. "Hello, Mrs. Jenkins," she said formally, as if we were mere acquaintances. "Hello, Catherine," I responded in the same tone. Peter, oblivious to the tension between us, smiled happily. The two most important women in my life, finally together. If only he knew how connected we really were. Dinner was served in the dining room with fine china and silver cutlery. The food was delicious, but I could barely taste it, such was my anxiety. Peter dominated the conversation, telling childhood stories, asking about my life, sharing plans for the future. "We're thinking of having a child soon," he revealed, holding Catherine's hand affectionately. My daughter almost choked on her wine. A child? My grandchild would also be the foster. Grandchild of my foster son? This web of relationships was so complex it made me dizzy. That would be wonderful, I managed to say. You'll be excellent parents. And you would be the perfect grandmother, Peter added, not knowing how much truth that phrase carried. Catherine remained silent, drinking more wine than usual. When Peter got up to fetch dessert from the kitchen, we were left alone for the first time. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered, tense. "Doing what, daughter?" "This, keeping the secret. You could have destroyed everything." I looked at her, at the girl I once cradled in my arms. And what good would that do? Destroy your happiness out of revenge? That's not how I raised you, Catherine. I saw tears forming in the corners of her eyes, but she quickly contained them when she heard Peter returning with dessert. The evening continued with superficial conversations and forced smiles on Catherine's part. When I finally said goodbye, Peter insisted on taking me home, but I refused. I needed time alone to absorb everything that was happening. "I'll come back to pick you up next weekend," he promised at the door. "I want to make up for all the lost time." I hugged him tightly, smelling the expensive cologne he wore, so different from the baby powder scent I remembered of him. On the way home, in the almost empty bus, I let the tears flow freely. I had found my Peter again, the boy I had raised as a son. But at the same time, I was losing my Catherine once more, even being so close to her. The following weeks brought a new routine to my lonely life. Peter visited me regularly, sometimes alone, other times with Catherine, who maintained a polite distance, as if we were just acquaintances. With each visit, he brought gifts: a new television, a set of pots and pans, clothes that I hesitated to wear because they were so fine. I tried to refuse, but he insisted. "You took care of me when I needed it most, Mom. Now it's my turn to take care of you." How could I explain to him that I didn't do anything expecting repayment, that I cared for him out of love, the same love that made me accept the silence now, to protect the happiness that he and Catherine had built? One Sunday afternoon, while Peter had gone to buy bread for our coffee, I was left alone with Catherine in my small kitchen. The silence weighed between us like an invisible wall. "Why don't you tell him?" she asked, suddenly stirring her coffee with a spoon, avoiding my gaze. "Why maintain this lie?" I sighed, observing the wrinkles on my own hands. "What good would it do, my daughter? Destroy the love he feels for you. He'll never forgive me when he finds out, and one day he will find out." "Perhaps." I lightly touched her arm, feeling her stiffen at my touch. "But that revelation won't come from me." Her eyes finally met mine, watery. "I'm ashamed of what I did, of who I was, of how I treated you." "I know. It's not just that," she continued, her voice almost a whisper. "I'm ashamed of where I came from, of our house in Brownsville, of the musty smell, of the patched clothes. When I met Peter at the university, I made up a story. I said my parents had died, that I was raised by rich uncles in Westchester. He never suspected. And you, have you ever felt ashamed of your origins or lied about who you are to impress someone?" Her words cut me like shards of glass, but I didn't show it. How many nights had I stayed awake sewing so she could have decent clothes for school? How many times had I hidden my own hunger so she could eat? But I understood her desperation, her need to escape that life of deprivation. "The past is the past, daughter. What matters is the now." She wiped away a furtive tear when we heard Peter returning. In seconds, her mask of perfection was back, in place. That conversation, though brief, opened a small crack in the wall between us. In the following visits, I noticed Catherine less tense, more willing to participate in conversations. Once, when Peter had to answer a work call, she even helped me wash the dishes, something she had never done before. Remember when you taught me how to make fudge? She asked softly while rinsing the plates. I smiled. Yes, I do. You were about 8 years old and wanted to take some to the school party. We made a huge bowl and you ate so much that you got sick. She laughed, a sound I hadn't heard in a long time. And you stayed up all night with me, putting cold compresses on my forehead. For a moment, it was as if time had gone back, as if we had never separated, as if she had never denied me. But the reality was different. We now lived in different worlds. She in Boston's high society, me in my small Brooklyn apartment. The bridge between us was Peter, who continued to visit me, becoming increasingly present in my life. During one of these visits, he arrived with news that would change everything. Mom, I need to tell you something incredible, he said, barely able to contain his excitement. Catherine is pregnant. The news hit me like lightning. A grandchild. My grandchild. Peter's grandchild, too, in a way. The child would connect our lives in ways we couldn't even imagine. How wonderful, my son, I exclaimed, hugging him tightly to hide the tears that were starting to form. You'll be wonderful parents. I want you to come live with us, he said suddenly, or at least closer. We bought a house in Greenwich. There's a guest house in the back that would be perfect for you. That way, you could help take care of the baby like you took care of me. I was speechless. Live in my daughter's house, pretending to be just her husband's nanny. How would I bear this farce daily? See my grandchild grow up calling someone else grandmother. I need to think, Peter. It's a very big change. Of course, Mom, talk to Catherine too. She's excited about the idea. I doubted that statement, but said nothing. When he left, I spent the night awake, tossing and turning in bed, thinking about what to do. Part of me wanted to accept, to be close to my grandchild, to try to rebuild some kind of relationship with my daughter. Another part knew that the situation was unsustainable, that the truth always finds a way to come out. The next morning, to my surprise, Catherine appeared alone at my door. She was pale and looked like she had been crying. Can I come in, Mom? That word, Mom, sounded strange coming from her after so long. I made space and she entered, sitting on the worn sofa in the living room. Did Peter tell you about the baby? I nodded, sitting beside her. Yes, he did. I'm very happy for you. And about the proposal for us to live together. That too. But don't worry, I won't accept. I know you don't want that. She bit her lip, looking at her own hands. Actually, I came to ask you to accept. I looked at her confused. Why? Because I'm tired of lying. Because I want my child to know their real grandmother, because... Her voice faltered. Because I miss you, Mom. The tears I had held back in the last few weeks finally escaped. I took her hands in mine, feeling how cold they were despite the morning heat. Are you sure? What about Peter? He'll find out eventually. I know, and I'll tell him. Not now, not with the baby on the way, but I will tell him, and face the consequences. At that moment, I recognized in the woman before me the determined girl I had raised, the one who faced challenges with her head held high, who didn't easily give up on what she wanted. I felt immense pride in her. Then let's do this together, I said, squeezing her hands, one step at a time. In the weeks that followed, Peter took care of the move. My few things were packed and taken to the new house in Greenwich. The guest house was bigger than my entire apartment, with a small living room, bedroom, bathroom, and even a kitchen that I rarely used, since I had most meals in the main house. It was strange at first. Catherine still maintained a certain distance when Peter was around, but when we were alone, we slowly began to rebuild our relationship. She consulted me about the pregnancy, asked for advice, sometimes even allowed herself moments of vulnerability as in the old days. One night, while Peter was on a business trip, she came to the guest house and we talked until late. She laid her head on my lap as she did when she was a child, and I let my fingers run through her hair. "I'm afraid of not being a good mother," she confessed. "We all are afraid when we become parents for the first time. I was terrified when you were born. I had no idea what I was doing. But you were a good mother, the best anyone could have." She held my hand. "And I treated you so badly." "Shh, that's in the past. No, I need to say this. When I saw you on that street after so long, my first instinct was joy. I wanted to hug you, tell you about my life. But then I remembered all the lies I had told Peter, his friends, the society I now live in, and I panicked." "I understand, daughter." "No, you don't understand, because I don't even understand how I could call you a beggar." Her voice broke on the last word. "The person who loved me most in the world." I hugged her tightly, letting her cry on my shoulder. "What matters is that we're together now, and your child will have the complete family." When Peter returned from his trip, he noticed the change between us. "You two seem closer," he commented during dinner. Catherine and I exchanged nervous glances. "We're getting to know each other better," she answered with a half smile. "And you? Have you ever been through a moment when you needed to tell a difficult truth to someone you love? How did you handle it?" The months passed quickly. Catherine's belly grew, and with it, my anxiety about the future. How would we explain to the child who I really was? How would Peter react when he discovered the truth? The baby's room was prepared with all the care. Peter made a point of including me in all decisions, from the color of the walls to the choice of furniture. "You have experience in this, Mom," he would say, with that smile that reminded me so much of the boy I raised. One afternoon, while we were organizing the baby's clothes, Peter found a small box at the bottom of the closet. Inside was a tiny, blue crocheted bootie. "How beautiful," he commented, turning the small shoe between his fingers. "Where did you buy this, love?" Catherine froze. I immediately recognized that bootie that I myself had made when she was a baby. She must have kept it as a memento all these years. It was a gift," she stammered. "From whom?" Our gazes crossed. I saw the panic in her eyes, the indecision. I was about to intervene when she took a deep breath and said, "From my mother." Peter looked confused. "I thought your mother had died when you were little." "That's what I told you, Peter." She sat in the rocking chair in the room, her hands protectively over her belly. "But it's not true." I stood paralyzed, my heart racing. Was it now? After so long, would the truth come out like this, because of a baby booty? "I don't understand," Peter said, sitting on the edge of the crib. "What are you talking about, Catherine?" She looked at me, seeking strength. I nodded slightly, offering my silent support. "My mother is alive, Peter, and you know her." His face was a mixture of confusion and shock. "Who? Where is she?" Catherine took my hand, pulling me close to her. "Here, Mrs. Jenkins is my mother." The silence that followed was deafening. Peter looked from me to Catherine, as if trying to fit the pieces of an impossible puzzle. He let the booty fall to the floor and stood up, running his hands over his face in a nervous gesture. "Your mother, what do you mean? You said your parents died in an accident when you were 12. "I lied," Catherine admitted, her voice trembling, but firm. "I lied about everything, Peter. About my family, about my origin. I grew up in Brownsville, not in Westchester. My mother worked as a domestic worker and seamstress. My father was a doorman. We never had money. When I met you at college, I was ashamed of who I was." Peter backed away, as if he had been slapped. His eyes turned to me, full of confusion and hurt. "And you? You knew this all along, since that day on the street?" I felt the weight of each word, of each lie sustained in the last few months. "Yes, Peter. Catherine is my daughter. The child I had after I left your parents' house. So that day, when she called you a beggar—" "She didn't acknowledge me as her mother," I completed, the pain of that memory still alive. "She didn't want you to know the truth." Peter walked to the window, turning, his back to us. His broad shoulders seemed burdened by an invisible weight. "Everything was a lie," he murmured, more to himself than to us. Our entire story. Catherine stood up with difficulty, her advanced belly limiting her movements. "No, Peter. What I feel for you is real. It always has been. I was just afraid of losing you if you knew the truth about me." He turned around, his face marked by a mixture of anger and pain. "And what else have you hidden, Catherine? What else don't I know about you, about us?" "Nothing else, I swear." She tried to approach, but he backed away. "I know I was wrong, that I hurt you. But please, don't let this destroy what we've built." Peter passed by us without saying a word, leaving the baby's room. We heard the front door slam shut, then the sound of the car pulling out of the garage. Catherine collapsed on the floor, sobbing. I knelt beside her, hugging her as I did when she was a child and had nightmares. "He's going to leave me," she cried. "He's going to leave me alone with the baby." "Shh, he just needs time." I tried to calm her, although I wasn't sure of that. "Peter is a good man. He always has been." "I've destroyed everything, Mom, out of pride, out of shame. I lost years we could have spent together, and now I'm going to lose my husband too." I spent the entire night with her, waiting for Peter to return. But he didn't come back. Not that night, nor the next. Catherine was devastated, barely ate, barely slept. I worried about her and the baby, tried to convince her to eat, to rest. On the third day, I received a call on my cell phone. It was Peter. "Can we talk, Mrs. Jenkins?" His voice sounded tired, distant. Just the two of us. I agreed, and we arranged to meet at a cafe in the center of Greenwich. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting at a secluded table, his eyes red from lack of sleep. "Thank you for coming," he said when I sat across from him. "How are you, my son?" He gave a sad smile. "Confused, hurt. I don't even know where to begin." "Begin by asking me whatever you want to know. No more lies, I promise." He nodded, taking a sip of coffee that must have already been cold. "When you left my father's house, where did you go?" "I went back to the projects. Found work as a maid, then met Benjamin, a good man, a widower. We got married and had Catherine when I was already 42 years old." "And the letters you sent me?" "Your father and stepmother. Intercepted them. I only found out years later." Peter closed his eyes for a moment. "I spent so much time looking for you. I thought you had abandoned me." "Never, my son. You were my first maternal love, the child who taught me to be a mother." "And Catherine? Why did she deny you that day?" I sighed, looking for the right words. "She fought hard to escape poverty, Peter. She got a scholarship to the university, met people from another world. I think she was afraid of losing all that if you knew the truth. She didn't trust me." The hurt in his voice was palpable. "Did she think I would love her less because of her background? I can't explain fear, son. I only know it exists and makes us commit terrible mistakes." Peter remained silent for a few minutes, stirring his coffee that no longer had sugar. Finally, he raised his eyes to me. "And you? Why did you keep the ish secret?" The question I feared most. "Out of love, for both of you. I didn't want to destroy the happiness you had built, even if it meant continuing to be treated as a stranger by your own daughter." "Even so," I touched his hand on the table, "we mothers make sacrifices that others don't understand, including our daughters." Peter gently withdrew his hand. "I need more time, Mrs. Jenkins. I don't know if I can forgive so many lies." "I understand. But remember, there's an innocent child in the middle of all this. Your son." "Or daughter," he corrected with a small smile, the first since we began the conversation. "Or daughter," I agreed, "who deserves to have their father and mother together." We said goodbye with a tense hug. I returned home with a heavy heart, not knowing what to say to Catherine. She was waiting for me in the living room, anxious for news. "How was it?" "What did he say?" "He's hurt, daughter. He needs time." She nodded, her eyes downcast. "Do you think he'll forgive me?" "I don't know, but I think so. Peter has always had a good heart." The days that followed were of agonizing waiting. Peter would call sometimes, but only to check on Catherine and the baby, never to speak to her directly. I served as an intermediary, passing on messages, trying to keep hope alive. A week later, I was embroidering on the porch of the guest house when I heard a car park. It was Peter. My heart raced as I watched him walk toward the main house. Had he come to get his things or to talk to Catherine? I stayed on the porch, respecting their space, but tense about what might happen. An hour later, Peter appeared at the door of the guest house. "Can I come in, Mom?" I nodded, noticing that he had gone back to calling me Mom, not Mrs. Jenkins. It was a good sign. "I talked to Catherine," he said, sitting beside me, "about everything." And it still hurts. I still don't understand how she could lie for so long, how both of you could. I lowered my eyes, ashamed. It was wrong, I know. "But I also thought about you," he continued, "about how hard it must have been to see me treating you as a stranger, knowing you were my wife's mother, my child's grandmother." "I would do it all again," I admitted, "if it meant seeing you two happy." Peter took my wrinkled hands in his. "I'll need time to trust again, to rebuild. But I want to try, Mom, for us, for the strange and complicated family that we are." Tears ran down my face without my being able to contain them. "Thank you, my son." "Don't thank me yet. The road will be long and difficult, but we'll be together. That's what matters." He stood up, kissing my forehead. "I'm going home today. Catherine is waiting for me for dinner. Are you coming?" Of course I am." That night, the three of us dined together for the first time as a true family. There was tension in the air, of course, wounds that would take time to heal completely. But there was also hope, and that was more than I had ever dreamed of having again. 3 months later, Catherine went into labor. We all went to the hospital, anxious and nervous. Peter stayed in the delivery room with her, while I waited in the waiting room, remembering the day I gave birth to my own daughter, alone in that public hospital, with only Benjamin by my side. After hours of waiting, Peter appeared at the door, his face tired but radiant. "It's a girl," he announced. "Catherine wants you to come in." When I entered the room, I saw my daughter lying in bed, holding a small bundle in her arms. Her eyes shone with tears and joy. "Mom," she called with a weak voice, "come meet your granddaughter." I approached with my heart pounding. The baby was perfect, with a fuzz of dark hair and rosy cheeks. Catherine placed her in my arms, and I felt that overwhelming love that only a grandmother can feel. "What are you going to call her?" I asked, moved. Catherine looked at Peter, who nodded with a smile. "Martha," she answered, "like her grandmother." At that moment, all the pain, all the lies, all the lost years seemed to dissipate. There I was, Martha, holding my granddaughter, Martha in my arms, with my daughter and my foster son by my side. An unlikely family built on mistakes and successes, on lies and truths, on forgiveness and love. "Thank you," I whispered, kissing little Martha's forehead. "Thank you for giving me this chance." Peter put one arm around my shoulders, the other around Catherine. "We're a strange family, aren't we? But we are a family." "The most beautiful family," I agreed. Today, at 75 years old, I watch my little granddaughter turn 3. She runs through the garden of the house where we all live together, calling Grandma when she needs help getting on the swing. Catherine and Peter have overcome the hurt, although sometimes there are still difficult moments, painful memories. But we move forward, one day at a time. Last week, Catherine surprised me with a gift, an album with old photos that I didn't even know she had kept. Photos of us in Brownsville, of our simple little house, of the modest but happy birthdays. And on the last page, a recent photo, me, Catherine, Peter, and little Martha, all smiling in the garden. "So we never forget who we are and where we came from," she wrote in the dedication. Thank you for reading to the end. If this story touched you in some way, like, and share it with someone who needs to hear this,